Hi, I'm Mark Gelfelt, and welcome to our Basics of LEED workshop. We're going to review some fundamentals of the LEED rating systems, and this is actually excerpts from a Green Associate workshop that the USWC chapter recently conducted. Mostly focused on how to help people prepare for the LEED Green Associate exam and give an overview of green buildings. The reason that there are two separate exams, the reason there's a Green Associate and a separate AP exam is because not everybody that needs to know about LEED needs to become an AP and actually, administer and work on LEED projects. So the Green Associate, if your career aspirations are related to sustainability, but you're not going to be intimately involved in green building projects on a day-to-day basis, but you need to be able to not only have the knowledge, but show that you have that knowledge, then the Green Associate exam is for you. So in like my world, the architects and engineers, a marketing person in our office would be a good example to be a Green Associate. They're not going to be working on LEED projects every day, but certainly need to know about it and be able to talk about it, intelligently. If you are going to be working on LEED projects, whether you're going to be administering them or just working on your little piece of it, then really that's what the AP exams are targeted for. And since people work in different fields, if you're mostly doing new construction projects, then BD&C is probably right for you. A lot of interior designers people who work on CI type projects would get the ID&C. If you're a building operator or a building owner, you might go for the O&M, whatever your field is. Yeah.
What is the neighborhood development?
So, we're going to talk about those rating systems here in a little bit, but LEED for homes, I did skip over LEED for homes and neighborhood developments because I don't care about them. No, homes is focused on single family and multifamily homes, right? Makes sense. Neighborhood developments looks at a whole neighborhood of homes and buildings. So looking at the bigger picture from not just an individual building, but the whole infrastructure and the whole development area being sustainable.
And LEED for homes is embedded in your development.
They use golf carts instead of cars.
Yeah. So like there's a great LEED for neighborhood development outside a mile from downtown Savannah called Sustainable Bellwood. And they knocked it out of the park. It was an old brownfields area. They were able to achieve LEED Gold for all the homes, and there were single-family homes, and there was all up to three. It goes LEED goes to 3 stories. So they had townhomes, and there was already existing infrastructure, so they got a lot of brownie points for that, right? And so they were kind of redeveloping. The place is multi-generation. It has SCAD students and all the way up to retirees. It's got this huge community organic garden that is just really well used. It was 100% leased in halfway through phase 1.
What's the name of this place?
Sustainable Bellwood.
Bellwood,
Fellwood. We brought the sustainability consultant down here to speak. I saw him speak at Greenville. It was phenomenal, and the energy savings he achieved. What really caught me was that he achieved such energy savings in hot, humid climate on a neighborhood level. And this project just really knocked it out of the place. And I'm happy we can email the PowerPoints on our website. I think we transferred over anyway. But yeah, it can be done. We're now trying to take it to all the funders of affordable housing and saying, green building can be done easily. You just have to think about it and have that integrations on. Does that answer your question?
So beyond those 5 in the Green Associate, there's then what's called the LEED Fellow, kind of modeled after, like the AIA Fellow, somebody who has, years and years and years of, experience in sustainability and LEED, and has really demonstrated, to be in that elite class of LEED people. There's a whole bunch of requirements just before you can even apply, and a very rigorous approval process. And then the last one, the LEED APs without specialty, when I said before, used to be that you didn't have a green associate or specialty credential, you just took a test and you were a LEED AP. That has kind of gone away, but there's still some of those people that are floating out there that didn't then opt in to upgrade their LEED AP into one of these specialty credentials. So like I took the exam 2005, 6, something like that originally, maybe earlier. And so it was just a LEED AP. Everybody was LEED AP. When the new system came out, we had the option to opt in to the new system. So I had to do some prescriptive continuing education requirements and then got my LEED AP, B, D, and C credential. Which brings me to continuing education. To keep your Green Associate or your AP, you need to do a certain amount of continuing education for the Green Associates. Every 2 years, you have to have 15 hours of continuing education related to sustainability. 3 of those hours have to be what we call LEED specific, things that are specifically geared towards the LEED rating system. For the APs, it's 30 hours every 2 years, and 6 of those hours have to be LEED specific, focused on one of the rating systems.
And if you become a chapter member, I mean, literally, you pretty much get all your credentialing needs.
Right, people always say, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to take courses and pay money to to Red Vector or whoever to take these courses just to get my my credits." And then I always point out to them there are plenty of either free or no-cost opportunities all around. The chapter is a great resource, certainly for really all of your continuing education. Just our normal events count towards the non-LEED specific credits, and then we have a program specifically geared towards helping you get your LEED specific credits, because if you're not working on a LEED project, you have to take a special classes that are approved to be LEED specific. We have what we call a CE Coffee webcast series. Happens the third Wednesdays of the month in the morning. They're at Alden White's offices, which is over on near used to be St. Luke's, St. Vincent's. Yeah, Salisbury. Anyway, so it's free for chapter members. You go, you drink some coffee, you have some bagels, and you sit and you watch an hour long or hour and a half, depending on what we're showing, webcast on a various topic. Depends on what topic that is. They're all LEED specific. You come to those every month, and you get all of your LEED credits, let alone the LEED specific. So we're here.
Usually cutting edge.
We're here to help. All right, so let's dive a little bit into the different rating systems. Not a great deal, but a little bit. The LEED BD and C, Building Design and Construction rating system, is the one that gets most talked about because that's just what a lot of people in the AEC, architect, engineer, contractor world usually work on. So again, we got our 6 or 7 categories depending on how you split up innovation and regional priority. We're going to talk about some of these strategies later here after lunch. But so in sustainable sites, we're dealing with the site the building is on and what's around it and how people get to it. So the site you pick, whether it's a greenfield site or a brownfield site or a renovation project, the development density, building in an urban area that already has lots of basic services and infrastructure, that's good, as opposed to knocking down trees and building on a natural, pristine, never been developed greenfield site. So we look at those types of strategies. Alternative transportation strategies to get people to the buildings, either to reduce or minimize their carbon footprint in the transportation. I mentioned stormwater before, how we deal with the water and the rainwater that falls on the site. We talk about things like heat islands, that absorbing solar radiation and re-radiating it, and how bad that is and affects microclimates and populations, and light pollution. Keeping the light that we're putting on our site from shining up into the sky and keeping it where it's going to go. Water efficiency is really pretty straightforward. It's all about minimizing how much water your building uses, both inside the building and out. Energy and atmosphere is all about energy, trying to reduce the amount of energy that your building uses. and a bunch of different strategies and how we do that. We'll talk about all these things later on. Materials and resources is all about the materials that go into constructing the building. What's in the materials? Do they have recycled content? Can we reuse existing materials to repurpose them? Where the materials came from, minimizing the transportation impact of getting those materials to the site, and so on. Indoor environmental quality, again, about the health and healthfulness of the building for the people who occupy it or live in it. Connection to the outside, controllability of your systems, be able to control your temperature and your lighting, indoor air quality, just make sure you're comfortable and happy in the building, and then innovation and regional priority we talked about a little bit already. And you'll see as we go through these different rating systems that it's basically the same categories in most cases, just the credits are a little more tailored to that rating system. So in the interior design and construction, that's the commercial interiors. So like I said before, there's less credits about the site because we're just renovating this area in a already developed core and shell building. We don't have a whole lot of impact as to what happened in the parking lot when the building was originally built. Same with water. Really the only impact that we can have on that is plumbing fixtures that are within our site. We don't have a lot of landscape impact. But energy and materials and environmental quality, those are important things, and we want to minimize the impact that goes in there. So the way we get to 100 points in each rating system, even though there's different numbers and types of credits, is that the credits are weighted differently in the different rating systems. So that I thought I had a slide on that. The energy credits have more impact in new construction than they do in energy atmosphere. I think that's true. But materials has more impact in the ID&C than it does in new construction. So depending on what you're doing, the credits are weighted differently. So a strategy might not just be worth 1 point and be worth multiple points. Existing buildings, operations, and maintenance. The big difference there is it's not about the construction, the design and construction of the building itself. It's about how we operate it. So when we get into the sites category, we're talking about things like hardscape management, how we're managing the site, and as well as things like how are the people getting to the building for alternate transportation. We'll still talk about things like heat islands. When we talk about water, sure, we want to minimize the amount of water that our plumbing fixtures use, but we also start talking about processed water, things like cooling towers and other uses of water in the building. In the energy category, it's more about not just designing your building to be energy efficient, but operating it to be energy efficient, and then actually measuring how much the energy the building is actually using and managing it that way. And when we talk about materials, it's about purchasing, the things that we buy that go into the building, everything from paper and ongoing consumables and electronics and just everything that goes into the building. We can do that more sustainably and then manage how that waste goes out through recycling and waste stream audits. That's where we get into materials for EBOM. And then IEQ is pretty straightforward, and innovation and design. Well, that slide's just this one. So that's the pie chart that shows kind of the weighting of the different categories. This one in EBOM, showing that as a percentage, there's a lot more energy credits than, say, indoor air quality or materials. A lot more potential. So of the 100 points, you can see, energy atmosphere. There's 35 total points, which is almost a third of the whole rating system. Somewhere in here, I guess I skipped over my slide for, I think I hit it. Slide for, look at that, hidden slide. So for new construction, I like to show this because it really gives you an impact of where you have to be focusing if you're going to try to achieve LEED certification. You're not going to get high levels of certification in most of the LEED rating systems if you're not spending not earning a bunch of points in the energy and sites category. Before the credits were all weighted differently in version 2 of LEED, every credit was worth 1 point. So the famous example is you got the same amount of points for putting a bike rack and changing rooms in your building as you did for commissioning of the building. And that just seems a little out of whack. Yeah.
What is the energy category? What is that encompass?
We're going to go into that in a lot more detail, but it's, again, about minimizing the amount of energy that goes into the building through reducing the demand, energy efficient systems, commissioning is in there, measurement and verification. We're going to talk about it in more detail.
And Mark's example of the bike rack, we always hear about bike rack example, but that's an example too of how LEED adjusted. It got scathing comments about how you can build a green building without addressing energy, right, early on. So this was like the first 5 to 10 years it was out. Even was taken to court and all that kind of stuff, and LEED was fine saying, okay, let's up the bar, let's try. But there's always been this kind of approach, well, let's work together in consensus, let's make this the best rating system it can be. So the bike rack became less weighted, and things that help address climate change and water quality and supply and all that became heavier weighted. So it's a process. It used to be based on the red list that came out of EPA, kind of really scientific based, but then they realized they didn't really fit that. So it's through a whole bunch of really, really smart people that dedicate hundreds of hours, like Mark, to this process, all over the world, nationally and internationally. It's just consensus based. They sit in a room and they fight it out. And they're like, no, you haven't thought about the habitat. You haven't thought about the little salamander. So it's truly a time-consuming but robust process.
And that gets into the raising the bar of LEED too. So in version 2, you can pretty much get a certified building just by building a pretty good building and documenting it real well. You get all your points in the materials and the energy indoor environmental quality points. Some of the things that were a little easier to do. Specify this material, and we're going to be in good shape. But that wasn't leading to the performance that we want to get out of LEED buildings. So intentionally, the credits in version 3 were weighted heavier towards things that are going to produce better outcomes, lead to better performance. Energy and carbon footprint and water, and really high up there, all the way down to to some lower rankings. So the sites became more important and the energy became more important. And water, every time a new version of LEED comes out, there's more water credits, which I think is good, because if we weren't talking about energy, we would be talking about water a lot more as a nation.
The other thing how LEED is structured is it's flexible, right? You don't need to go for all the points. Your client is not big on sites. Well, you'll lose, but you'll have to make it out with others. But there's flexibility built in. A lot of people feel like it's very, very structured and you have to do everything. Well, no, there's some ability to get where you need to go. On buildings are very specific. Clients are very specific on their needs, right? So LEED has enough movement in it to be able to get to green buildings. We're trying to get to 30% of green buildings, right? And then really get to transformative. It's just going to be multi-generational.
Sarah reminded me of a point I forgot to talk about when we were talking about the points and the 100-point system. In addition to the points, there are prerequisites, things that you have to do to get your building certified. And they're a little different for each of the different rating systems, but I don't know if I have a place where we're going to go over them before. But so for instance, let's go back. So for instance, using the BD and C rating system as kind of the baseline. And remind me if I forget any, but in sites. So there's a prerequisite that you have to have erosion and sediment control plan and program. So we don't want to erode the site as we're building on it. Pretty straightforward stuff we do on every construction project. In water, there's a prerequisite for a minimum water use reduction. So right off the bat, we need to get to 20% water reduction? Yeah, 20% water use. I got two rating systems in my brain, and the numbers are different. So 20% water use reduction over what the baseline would be for standard plumbing fixtures. Just to get certified, you've got to automatically reduce your water consumption. And then there's additional points for going beyond that. In the energy and atmosphere, there's actually 3 prerequisites. One for commissioning, fundamental commissioning, and we'll talk a lot more detail after lunch about what commissioning is, but again, making sure that the building systems are working the way they're supposed to. One for minimum energy performance, so to achieve a 10% reduction beyond whatever the energy code is, using ASHRAE as the standard there. So again, right off the bat, to get your building certified, you have to be 10% more efficient than a standard building. And then the third one is refrigerants, no CFCs in your building refrigeration systems, which usually isn't too much of a problem. In materials, there's one prerequisite for having a dedicated space for collection and storage of recyclables. Again, a strategy. If we have a place where people can go to recycle their paper, cardboard, glass, plastics, and metals, then there's a better chance that they're going to recycle than if there isn't that space in the building. So that's a prerequisite. We have to have that. Environmental quality has 2. We have to have minimum ventilation requirements that are usually just the code minimum nowadays, but we need to bring in a certain amount of outside air, fresh air, into the building so people, can live and breathe and have good indoor air quality. Well, there was I talked at Ash's class earlier this week. Was that this week? Gosh. And one of the things that I was going through kind of a history of building, design, and construction, and in the 60s and 70s, we started having these strategies where we wanted to close up buildings and make them as tight as we could to keep all the energy in. And the negative consequence of that turned out to be, indoor air quality problems and sick building syndrome because we weren't bringing in fresh air for people to breathe. So we try to learn those lessons as a nation and move forward. So that's a requirement. We got to bring in enough outside air. The other one is no smoking. The building has to environmental tobacco smoke control is the name of the credit. But the building either has to be a non-smoking building, or if smoking is allowed in it, you have to have a dedicated room where you lock the people inside while they're smoking that's ventilated. So prerequisites. What's that?
Oh,
Yes. Yeah. If you've ever, I always think of the Atlanta airport and walk through there, and there's this the glass walls, and they open the door, haze of smoke of people in there. But again, so prerequisites, things that we have to do, don't get any points for. We got to do those before we start earning our 100 points. And there are different prerequisites for the different rating systems, but that's kind of the big picture overview. All right, so we talked about that, and then EBOM. LEED for homes. I don't know anything about LEED for homes, so it's got kind of the same categories. Sarah's a LEED for homes person. You got 2 minutes you want to talk about it?
Well, first we say if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk after, because most people in here probably aren't on it.
Because Sarah can't talk for 2 minutes about anything.
So that's my fault there. The second is it's a very, very different process from commercial. It is, and I will say, quite frankly, USBC is still struggling with it. It is, as far as single-family homes, it's not anything what they predicted. So it's going gangbusters in the multifamily homes. So in the 3 stories, and then the higher than that, it's new construction and existing, and it's the ROI from the owner's perspective is great. On the single family homes, ironically, they thought it was going to be all kind of middle of the road. It's been custom homes and affordable. So Habitat for Humanity has got a bunch of LEED homes. In fact, I think they just did a big announcement of like 10 or 20% of the building stock will be LEED for homes certified, because they figured out they've systematized it. They've figured out how to keep all the costs down, et cetera. And then custom homes, just it's more goodwill, got money to blow. Sorry. They want so sorry. I mean, they want to do the right thing, and they can take time, and they can put renewable energy. That was the wrong way to say it.
Well, when Sarah said that it's different, I mean, you can see those categories are different than the other, commercial rating systems. But some of the strategies have been incorporated into the new version of LEED, like innovation in the process turned into the integrated design process credit, and there's some more education and awareness things. But in addition to there being different categories, yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
I was going to say that in addition to the different categories, the it finally did get aligned to 100 points, didn't it?
Yeah.
But before it wasn't, and how many points you needed to get to a certain certification level changed based on how big your home was.
Yeah.
The home
Outside of the
adjuster, meaning that the bigger house you build for a 4-person family, the less sustainable that is. And so you would have to do more good things to get to level certification.
And that's what I meant by the line below.
Yeah.
Because,
That's what made me think of it.
right. So the
How can you have a 15,000 square foot certified home?
Starts with like negative 20 points. I mean, you have to make up a lot. Versus the medium is 1,900 square feet. So that's where it's. Sorry, one more thing before I forget. The other thing that they did, so they were expecting production buildings to just lob onto this, and the profit margin is just pretty tight. And with the materials having to be locally sourced, it got, logistically, it was kind of tough to make it all work. The other thing that they were surprised at is I'm a lead AP for homes, and the residential doesn't really have room for a consultant like commercial does. So that market has been surprisingly flat for everybody who got lead AP for homes. Not in California, but like elsewhere in the country, because it adds like a $3,000, $3,500 kind of price tag to have a consultant work through. We've had a local example here where they didn't hire a lead AP and they didn't get LEED certified because they didn't know about the no tropical wood. So there's a reason you hire a consultant. The problem is the residential market doesn't really work for the single family home. On the multi-family home, you usually have the in-house person that's LEED certified and totally gets it, and then the chance that you can just crank it out.
Did you just say a person who's LEED certified?
Oh my God!
Get out!
Okay, I'll be lead accredited.
I heard that, right?
Yeah, I heard it.
Gosh, sir.
Okay,
Get out of here.
So they're just surprised. So they're kind of trying to, like I said, it's going gangbusters in the mid-rise, and there's lots of single-family home, but they're still trying to make it work as seamlessly as they do.
I just wanted to say that even though it's a different process and maybe one that particular people may not be involved with, it's really important for all of us because, for instance, in Florida, we've got 9 million some homes, and I don't know, I think it's less than 1 million commercial sites, and there's a big emphasis in Florida on home building. It's a very big, on the energy front, it's a very big residential consumption footprint. So it's no less important, it's just that it's different and it's got some different market dynamics where in the commercial world, ultimately ROI and profit does get well considered. In the residential world, you've got a dichotomy between the production builders and the market as they perceive it that they're competing in. And the homeowners have a different perspective on it. So somebody buying an old home and trying to renovate it in ways that might be compatible with a more sustainable, maybe possibly LEED in the future design, it's very complex.
Okay.
Following up on Tom's comments, one of the things that I'm seeing in my estimating position is the bidding world has become a little gentler, for lack of a better word, as the economy starts to improve. And as a result, you have more, for the last couple of years, it's been bare bones, cutthroat, predatory, vicious stuff. And I'm being kind. I've spent long hours, gray hairs, lost hair, and but the economy has started to improve. Last year was miserable for us. And my point being is as the profit margins begin to improve and the marketplace begins to improve, people are beginning to relook at the advantages of sustainability again and incorporating it. Okay, we can start focusing on long term instead of just short term, get by, day to day.
And And I will say, I'll talk more about kind of chapter initiatives of how we're trying to go about it a little more creative and creating stirring up the residential market from the policy side and the market side. But one thing I also want to take away from Lead the Homes is new construction, you have to touch all 4 walls for a major retrofit. So like when I did my home, I really wanted to go LEED certified, right? LEED for Homes was in pilot stage, but when I made the decision, I was only touching 3 walls. Well, inevitably, guess what I did? I touched all 4 of my walls, but I was too far down the process to go back and try to get LEED certified. So right now, LEED for Homes is new construction or major renovation, and you touch all 4 walls. It's not for a retrofit. At Florida Green Building Coalition, you can get, which is just Florida, you can get certified under, not accredited, certified under FGBC for retrofits.
Remind me later, and we'll talk a little bit about cost. But I want to keep us just on track here. Neighborhood developments, we talked a little bit about. Again, that's different than the other commercial rating systems, focused on a whole development of buildings, of houses, and associated buildings, and talks about linkages, the overall design and neighborhood patterns, things like walkable streets and how compact the development is, and walkable communities. In a neighborhood developments project, at least one of the buildings needs to be by itself LEED certified. So if there's like a community center, a lot of times they'll do that building as a new construction, or maybe the homes. But the homes themselves don't have to be certified to get neighborhood development certification.
I think right now, that we have 4 or 5 LEED neighborhood development certified programs in Florida. They're pretty big, mostly outside.
So that's neighborhood developments. So real quick, not real quick, we're going to go through what the LEED process is and understand how we get a project from, hey, I want to build a building, to LEED certified, plaque on the wall. And I promise we're coming to the point where you get to eat. But the process is important. I don't know if you can read that. But the LEED certification process, and I'm talking about the new construction and commercial interiors rating systems, I'll talk about EBOM in a second, follows, really kind of parallels the design, construction, the building process. So we start a project with registering it with USGBC, well, GBCI actually. So you go to LEED Online and you register your project, you put in some basic information about the project, how big it is, where it is, what kind of building it is, and really what that does, it starts the process for you. It opens up access to a lot of tools, most of which is the LEED Online process. LEED Online is the online tool where we do all of our documentation for the certification process. It's where we fill out our forms that show that we've complied with all the credit requirements. It's where we upload drawings and cut sheets and things that prove that we have achieved the various credits. So registration opens that portal, and that's really where we start the process. You can't start too early. At the very earliest conceptual phases of a project is where you should be talking about sustainability, whether it's LEED or not, very beginning, rather than, and I still, to this day, every once in a while get calls that say, hey, we just started construction and we think we want to be a LEED certified, usually they say, project. Can we just like throw some green stuff on it? How can we go about that? And I just hang up on them because it's too late. Not really, but you can't just tack on green stuff at the end of a project. It really has to be integrated from the earliest phases. So when people say, how soon should I start? Say it can't be too early. We want to integrate all of the requirements and strategies, from the programming phase. We usually have a kickoff meeting of some sort with the entire team. We've talked about the integrated, holistic, everybody in the room process. You get the architect and the engineers and the civil and the landscape and the owner and the contractors and people who are going to operate the building. You get them all together throughout the project, but you kick off the meeting and you have a kickoff meeting and really set the strategies and goals for the project. And that's where I like to start assigning what we call credit guardians, where the people who are responsible for that credit are responsible for that credit. So, typically as an engineer, I end up getting responsibility for some of the energy credits or whatever, whereas the contractor is going to be responsible for some of the construction-related credits, and so on. So then we move into the design phase. That's when the project is being designed. Design team's doing their thing, meeting regularly, keeping on track of how we're doing on this strategy or that strategy, working with the contractors to determine the economic feasibility of certain strategies and whether they get incorporated. So the certification process doesn't have to be, but is usually divided into 2 steps. At the end of the design phase, the design team's done designing the building and has issued it for construction. Then we can kind of pause and upload to LEED Online all of the design phase credits, things that you can document at the end of design. Credits are all divided in either design phase credits or construction phase credits. And like you'd imagine, when you're done with the design, things that you've calculated or specified, well, not always specified, but things that you can show on the plans and the specs are usually design phase credits. The things that are related to construction, like did we actually use low VOC materials, did we actually have recycled content, did we actually divert construction waste, those types of things are construction credits. So we take all the design phase credits, we upload them to LEED Online. When we're all done with that, we push the button that says, okay, GBCI, please review our design phase credits. And they do that in 2 steps. This is the preliminary design phase review, where they'll take 4 weeks, they say. They look at all the credits, and then they send us back comments. Say, we've approved these credits, and these credits we have some comments and require additional documentation. You need to give us an extra cut sheet, or we did the calculation and you made this mistake here, or you just missed the boat completely. You better give us a good reason why we're not just going to reject this credit. So you get a chance to kind of a free review there, and then you have time to, they say 30 days, but you can really take as long as you want, to address all those comments and re-upload your responses and corrections for what we call the final design phase review. And they'll take another 3 weeks, review those credits, and then give you your final design phase credits and say we've approved all these credits and we've rejected these credits. If they've rejected credits, you can appeal them. You have to pay, what is it, $500 for each credit you appeal. If you say, no, we really did meet the credits, you're just not understanding. That's usually not the case. You usually miss the boat pretty completely if you get a credit denied, but you still have that opportunity to appeal, so all is not lost. You can keep appealing as long as you want. They'll keep taking your money every time. So that's done. Now all that time that's been going on, the contractor has been building the building, hopefully documenting all of the things that go into the building, all the recycled content, all the regional materials, doing construction IAQ plans, all those construction-related credits. Commissioning will get done, and at the end of construction, when everybody's all done with all that documentation, they upload it for the same process I just described, but for the construction phase. Preliminary construction phase review, 4 weeks, they review it, make comments, provide us this additional information, you respond, they review it again and give you your final construction phase approval. We've approved this many credits, denied these couple, you can appeal. You don't have to do them in those 2 phases. If you have a small project, you can just do a combined review, wait till the end of construction, submit all the credits all at one time. You don't have to, but the advantage of doing it in design phase and construction phase, especially on a project of any size, is usually by the time construction is done, the design team is long gone. They have done 3 other projects since then to try to get them to finish up their documentation and their credits, and they're like, I don't even have that file anymore. It's very tough. So doing it at the end of design when everything is still fresh in their minds and right there on their desktop is a lot easier. That's why we do it that way. So once you've gotten your final credits reviewed by GBCI, if you've gotten 40 credits, 40 points approved, then that's enough for certification. You hit the button and you accept and say, I accept your review, and you're certified. If you didn't get enough credits, if you only have 38 or 39 credits approved, well, then you're not going to be certified unless you've appealed a couple and get to where you need to be. If you've gotten 49 credits approved and 1 is denied, and that 1 gets you to the next level, gets you to silver, you may very well look a lot harder at that and see if you want to pay that money and appeal to get to that next level. There have been lots of times where I've been like right in the middle between two certification levels and had a credit rejected for no good reason, I don't think, and wanted to argue with them, but it really wasn't going to matter because it wasn't going to get me to the next level, so you just kind of let it go and move on with life. But that's when you're certified. Once you hit the final button that says, I accept your review, that's when you're certified. Then you can order your plaque and hang it on the wall and all that. So until you hit that final button, your project cannot be referred to as certified. You could say it's pursuing certification or targeted for or whatever, but until you get your final review and accept it, then you're not certified. So does that make sense? Register the project, design phase submittal, construction phase submittal, get your certification. That's the process. Yeah, you got to pay for the plaque now. It's a jip. And that process works for all of the rating systems, except for homes, except for existing buildings, operations, and maintenance. So since there's not construction that is going on in your project, there's not a design phase and a construction phase. In EBOM, we have what's called a performance period. So usually this is the process that it looks like. You start by trying to evaluate your building and what you're already doing and see if, how much of that contributes towards getting certification. You kind of do that evaluation. Inevitably, you're going to have to develop some sustainable purchasing policies and waste stream policies, actual written policies that your purchasing department may very well be the ones who implement. Those are usually prerequisites in the EBOM. You've got certain prerequisites to actually have the policy and then earn credits for demonstrating that you complied with the policy and actually made an impact. So, yeah.
Does this process start after the certification?
Sure. So you've got, I should have said before, you don't have to get EBOM certification. You don't have to have an already certified building. You can take the worst, non-green building in the world and get it EBOM certified. That's the whole point is that we want to not just address the buildings that are already designed and built to be sustainable, but attack the existing building market, which is obviously gigantic. So in the EBOM certification process, this is before we've even probably registered the project. That's what I'm talking about right this second. Is the evaluation.
The assumption is if you have certification on a new construction and then move into EBOM, the EBOM will be.
It should be.
That's the assumption, it should be.
That should be. That's the case. But it also deals with a lot of things that don't get addressed in new construction. Some of it does, but not all of it. So the evaluation is just to figure out where you need to go. And then usually you register, once you've made the decision that you're going to go for the certification, wherever that is, that's when you usually register the project, whether that's as you're developing the policies or not. But most buildings, most owners need to develop those because they don't already have them in hand. The important part, well, there's two important parts, but the important part is the performance period. So this is really the period where we're actually measuring what we're doing in the building. Performance period is just a period of time. You get to pick what it is, but it has to be between 3 months and 24 months of time, where you pick the date and you say, go. And from that point on, you're measuring and documenting all of these policies and everything that goes into the building that you just developed in the policies and procedures, time frame. So if it's 6 months, a year, whatever, during that time, you're documenting all of the purchasing that's gone on, the waste stream. You're documenting your water performance and your energy performance, just everything that goes into that. And at the end of the performance period is when you start doing your LEED online stuff. Well, you can do it as you're going, but that's really when you collect all that data that you've been collecting for that period and upload it all to LEED online, finish all your LEED credits, all your LEED documentation, and then submit. So it's a single submission, unlike the design and then construction. At the end of your performance period, you do it all at once, but it's still the same two-step process. They submit for a preliminary review, they give you comments, you address those comments, submit for final review, accept their comments if you've gotten, or accept their rulings if you've gotten enough credits for certified, and that's when you can say it's certified and hang the plaque on the wall. Now, overlaid with that whole process down there in the bottom, is the actual energy performance. In the design construction rating systems, you're showing how you designed your building to be energy efficient compared to ASHRAE 90.1. Here in EBOM, you're actually using Energy Star, which we'll talk about in a little bit later on, to actually document how your building is actually performing. So you take your energy bills, you put it into Energy Star, it's going to give you a number on a scale of 1 to 100 that tells you how your building stacks up. 69 is the minimum you need for the prerequisite, and you get additional points for the more efficient your building is actually operating. So the problem here is you need, for Energy Star, you need 12 months of energy data, which has to overlap somehow with your performance period. So in that evaluation process, if your building stinks, if your building has an Energy Star score of 6, when you need 69 to get prerequisite, you got some work to do before you can show that you are going to get an Energy Star score that's going to get you to the prerequisite. So a lot of times you start off with doing some energy auditing and retro-commissioning and some remediation to the building to improve the energy performance before you start your performance period, so that your 12 months of energy data is all good energy data after you've done modifications, so that you get a decent Energy Star score. Because if you've done this, if you just start your performance period and then at the end say, okay, let's go back and look at those last 12 months of bills now, and you have an Energy Star score of 6, well, that's not going to get you the prerequisite you need to get certified, and you kind of have to start over. That's why we always talk about doing energy benchmarking. How much energy is our building using right now, historically, and what do we need to do to improve it, or do we need to improve it? Maybe your building is very efficient. If it was a LEED certified, platinum building, hopefully it's performing the way it was supposed to. You plug in your data into Energy Star and say, oh yeah, look, we got an Energy Star score of 80. That's great. Not only do we get the prerequisite, we're going to get 10 extra points. But it's not usually the way that happens.
Actually, I just thought of it. You guys can do an Energy Star for all your buildings.
We talked about that.
So we'll talk about that.
And you and I should do the same, especially with you guys having non-10-week buildings now. That'd be pretty cool.
Well, you're not starting to. Look at that. We're doing one of them. We're looking at one of them now. Anyway, so that process is a lot different than the design construction processes. So I just want to make you aware of it, because that's what you need to know for the test.
Can I add on to Dennis's question about common sense?
No. Sure, go ahead.
So for me, something that Mark said triggered something. So this whole, and I'm going through it with my husband. My husband and I own a Montessori school, and we're right in this process. Mark helped us run, Energy Star numbers were a little low. We have some homework to do to get the school up to Energy Star.
It's way better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, you look at it's in the old Skinner Ranch house. It's pretty old. Anyways, this is where it's common sense meets reality, right? We know what we need to do. We know that we either do a full energy audit or we take a guess. And this is where it gets complex in the market, or not in the market, but just for an owner. We don't know whether to do windows. We don't know whether to do roof. We don't know whether, we don't know what's going to be the most bang for the buck. And at some point, it's kind of a, you can get as much as you can, but how much do you pay? Do you pay for a level 1, level 2, level 3 ASHRAE audit? Is it worth the ROI? And that's where a lot of owners stop. And that's where our huge homework is in this region. And I see a huge job opportunity for all you, right? And if we can, especially in hot humid climate, if we can make it easy, we can figure it out. But it's not common sense in some ways.
Right, because you don't want to guess that, I'm going to replace all the windows and that's going to make the difference. Replace the windows, start measuring your energy, get 5 or 6 months into it, and realize, no, we're still not where we need to be. So that's why you hire a professional. So I know I went through that kind of quick. Does everybody kind of understand that process? Performance period, because we're measuring actual performance. Okay.
There's a company called SkyTech, and I remember a long time ago they came out to our house and did this huge evaluation. But somebody like that, they could come in and look at a commercial building and evaluate.
That's what we call energy auditing.
Mm-hmm.
energy auditing and retro commissioning, commissioning of a existing building to try to improve its performance.
So I would expect that does both residential
Right.
and commercial. I think they specialize in residential, and then firms like Marks and others are commercial. So they can do whatever level you need to help make the decision. Level 3 is the most detailed with economic ROI analysis, helping make that decision over years. So like, they're talking about big systems which cost a lot of money. So like chiller system, do you buy it now? Or do you buy it 10 years from now when the rating is going to be higher, more efficient? But what does that mean in your dollars and all that? So
What we usually find when we do energy audits of older buildings, well, really any building, is that a lot of things are just ridiculous common sense, stupid things that's low-hanging fruit. Heating and cooling are running at the same time. We're trying to cancel each other out. The owner swears that there's night setbacks to shut off everything at night. We go out at midnight, all the lights are on, air handlers are running full steam. I mean, really straightforward, simple things that we get into the control systems and just get it running right and can improve energy performance quite a bit. Now, whether that's enough to get you to where you need to be for an Energy Star score or not, depends on the building.
But back to Susan Cruz, that's exactly what she did. She saved the Gulf County Public School System over $65 million since 2005 by low-hanging fruit. Actually, it stopped right on the table. She was able to pluck, right? It was so easy.
She's done it with almost no budget.
Exactly. And she's proven herself, and she just got, in this budget cycle, which is just horrible, right, for do all kinds, she just got $3 million allotted to her department so she can do more of what she's doing. And she thinks she can pay that back within a year. So,
All right. So that's that process. I already kind of talked a little bit about the process we go through as a LEED administrator, on our side, kind of from the kickoff meeting and educating the team. Used to be when we started LEED projects, 10 years ago, it was the first project for everybody in the room. They'd never done one before. Now 10 years later, everybody has a lot more experience, so there's generally less education that has to go on. But, we want to make sure everybody understands the fundamentals of LEED and what we're trying to do. Kickoff meeting. I'm a big believer in making sure you talk with the owner about what their green goals are at that kickoff meeting. Always ask the owner, what are your green goals for the project? What do you want to get out of it? And a lot of times they're kind of, surprised by that question. Well, I want to get certified. Okay, that's one goal. You want a plaque to hang on the wall for whatever reason. What are your other goals? And we start drilling down into they want to save energy or human health aspect of it to improve productivity or whatever. Whatever their goals are their goals. And it's important that everybody in the team hears that from the owner and understands it so that if later on we need to pick and choose between one strategy or another because of a budget constraint or whatever, then we can make that as an informed decision.
exactly right.
Thank you.
When I was doing my home, I had that deep talk with our contractor, and I said, energy, water, then materials. I was pregnant with my second child. Jeff was expanding the schools. We had no time to talk to him, basically, and he was able, it empowered him to make prioritized decisions. We got to paint day, and I'm like, I don't care what kind of paint, as long as there's no VOC. He's like, you wouldn't even pick out the color that I had given him my priorities, and he was off and running. So.
We use the LEED checklist, and this is and I can't read it, but this is kind of an expanded version of the checklist that we use throughout the process. So it lists all the different credits and the different categories with columns here for yes, maybe, and no. And when we start off at the LEED kickoff meeting, we go through all of the credits with all the team members in the room who have input, into that, and we determine which ones are the ones we're going to be able to do. They're already in the project, or easy to do, don't cost any money, whatever. Those are the yeses. On the far other side, the things that aren't applicable to the project or are not within the budget or can't be done for whatever reason, those go in the no category. And if we're not sure, we want to look a little bit more into this, maybe this might work, then those go in the maybe category. And as we go through the project, we keep, have regular meetings and review those credits, and everybody updates on that, and inevitably, things that you thought were yeses turn to nos, maybes split. Some of them go to no, some of them go to yes. Some of the nos turns into yeses. So you just keep track of it and keep talking, and your credit guardians do their due diligence, and hopefully at the end of the day, you've got enough credits and you get certified. So I always say at the end of that kickoff meeting, or at the kickoff meeting, we start with the prerequisites, so go through those. And if any of those is an absolute no, well, then that's the end of the meeting. Because if we're not going to get a prerequisite, then that's usually not the case. But also at the end of the day, if we don't have at least 40 credits, or if the owner said they want to get gold and we're only at 51 credits, well, then we've got some work to do, and we need to talk about that, either adjust priorities or figure out what we're going to do, really target it. Tom?
Is that a LEED USGBC product, or is that your company's?
USGBC has actually they have lots of them, but checklists, spreadsheets in both a simple one-page form and a little bit longer two-page form. This is, I just copy that and I add columns at the end that I've customized so that, actually I do it so that it puts the major requirements of the credit in this first column so that everybody can see it without having to go back to the book. Even I have to go back to the book sometimes to remember the difference between maximize open space and the other thing. Protect or restore habitat. I always get those mixed up. And then as we move on, I add columns here that update from each meeting. So when somebody says, no, I never said I was going to do that, then I go back and no, we agreed on this meeting that we were going to pursue that credit. And so
But
you just customize it.
Came from a
Yes.
source.
Yes. USGBC. You can go to the USGBC website and look through the credit for each of the rating systems, and they have spreadsheets for each one of the rating systems. All right. So talked about the green building kickoff meeting. That just kind of talks about what you talked about there. I'm trying to get this caught back up. So beyond the prerequisites, there's something called minimum program requirements. And these are the 7 or so things that your building site project has to comply with before you can kind of move on. It's really kind of addresses, I think things that people, tried to game the system before. So it's like, no, we got to write this stuff down so that you got to do all these things. And they're pretty straightforward, but you got to comply with all environmental laws. Straightforward. Has to be a permanent space or building. So LEED's not going to certify mobile homes or houseboats or anything like that. It has to be, you put it there and that's where it stays.
Actually, the funniest question I've gotten is, can you certify an outhouse?
It has one occupant, I guess.
And it was permanent, but it wasn't large enough.
Well, what about prefab housing?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's LEED certified, but that's,
Oh, sure.
you take it down and you can move it.
Well, when I say permanent, not stuff that's, deconstructible. Deconstruction is a good thing because we want to minimize the waste. We're talking about things that are intended to move, a mobile home or a boat or something like that.
Trailer.
Yeah, trailer. Has to have a reasonable site boundary. So Sarah mentioned before that you can draw your site boundary, what's included in the project, call it the LEED boundary. You can draw that however you want it to be within reason. It doesn't have to be the property line. It doesn't have to be the limits of construction. You can draw it a little bit, but you can't draw it, like a congressional district where it's just like really gerrymandered incredibly just to take advantage of the credits. And you can't have a piece over here and a piece there. It has to be contiguous. So it has to be somewhat reasonable. Has to be at least 1,000 square feet for a new construction project. So that's, I guess, why your outhouse wasn't big enough. For commercial interiors, it's much smaller. I think it's 250 square feet. Is that right? It's much smaller. Has to have at least one occupant, one FTE. So an outhouse, unless it had a attendant that was going to be there, that would be a little tough. So you got to have at least one FTE. You have to agree to share your building's energy and water usage with USGBC, either by signing up for the Energy Star Portfolio Manager and giving them access to it, or just when they call and say, hey, would you share how your building's been performing with us so that we can anonymously put it in with the rest of our data and do it. So it's usually just a checkbox unless the owner has a major heartburn with that. It's usually not a big deal. Of all the projects that we've got certified since this started, I don't know of anybody who's actually been asked for further data.
Yeah, the issues that I called out.
Yeah.
By LEED, by Roberts.
No, certainly portfolio manager, that's a little easier. and just login access. But anyway, and
Doesn't the legal agreement that you signed, doesn't it give USGC power to I guess you have to go through the owner, not to like JA.
Right. Right.
And just on the home side, on minimum floor requirements, they go lower than 1,000. And you start with plus points for getting small residential.
And the building to the site ratio has to be within 2%. So you can't have 1,000 acres of site area and a little bitty building in the middle. So those are just the things you're going to have to agree to when you go to register your project. And that's all the pages and pages and pages of, iTunes type, I agree, I'm not going to read it kind of stuff. So I just got to be aware of that. There's also some things that are in the details of this that have changed and are ever changing. For instance, you can't certify an addition to a building. You can, but there's a bunch of rules for what the addition has to be. It has to be, either like a separate everything that just happens to share a common wall with the other building, or it's twice as big as the existing building. It used to be people would build, kind of small additions, certify the addition with all the best intentions, and then go take the plaque and hang it in the lobby of the, building that wasn't certified. So,
why is that? Why would they ask you to do that? Based on what you learned.
it's not wrong. But
It's going to affect your energy.
Right, you're adding on, right?
You're
So
adding
all of
more
a
square
sudden you've
feet
got,
to cool and heat.
right, so the building is not integrated anymore. You just added on something, and now it all has to be kind of recalibrated, right? So they
well, it's actually if you're certifying the addition, it's actually kind of the opposite of that. You've got this new addition that, if it doesn't have its own separate HVAC systems or separate electrical or whatever, it's, maybe getting its chilled water and air conditioning from this old antiquated stuff in the existing building. It's just ducted over.
okay, I think I just said it in a different way.
Okay.
Basically, you have to look at the whole thing.
You just have to look at the whole building. USGBC, yes, that is definitely true. USGBC wants you to look at the whole building. So.
That's technical speak, this is layperson's.
Real quickly about the fees, just to give you an idea for what it costs for registration and certification. If you're a USGBC member, your company being a member company, or you're a member personally, registration is $900 just to go through the registration, and then the certification cost at the end when you go to certify it is based on dollars per square foot. There's minimums and maximums, so there's also just good general knowledge, because if somebody says, "Oh, we're not going to get the certification because it's going to cost us $500,000 for just to pay LEED for certification," that's not true. Even the very biggest building, the biggest building you could possibly have, millions of square feet, is going to max out at somewhere around $25,000 in certification fees. Yeah. So I put on my credit card, which is not fun. So, design and construction reviews, if you do them separately, $4 a square foot for $4 cents a square foot. God. For the design phase, and 1 cent a square foot for the construction phase. So, round numbers, that's 5 cents a square foot. If you do them combined, it's a little less. And then there's the minimum. So, if you just have 1,000 square foot, outhouse, then you're still going to pay, $2,000 and $500 for the design phase and construction phase. But the bigger ones, there's still minimums and maximums. So, if it's on the test, you want to be familiar with the $900 for registration and the 4 cents, 1 cent a square foot numbers. You don't have to memorize everything else.
And I realize the reason they ask on the test is that because you always get asked by the client. And the client is confused often about the LEED costs and registration versus certification versus commissioning. Usually people blame LEED for commissioning costs. And they wrap it all in and saying, oh my gosh, LEED is going to cost me an extra $70,000, $100,000. A former mayor said it was going to cost me an extra $7 million. We promptly went and met with them and said, no, that's actually not true, kind of thing. So you just have to be, you're going to inevitably encounter it, and so that's why they also put it on the test.
Okay. Let's break now. I've got a little 5-minute TED Talk video I'm going to show you, but let's break and do lunch first since you guys have been sitting for quite a while. So take your bio break if you need to. Grab some lunch. Turn a phone call if you need to. We'll get started again about 1/4 after, and you guys can eat while we're talking.
Yeah, jump in. We're both so used to teaching this alone.
Feel
It's like really.
Feel free. All right, so now we're going to talk about a little more detail in each of the different categories. And again, we're kind of focusing here on, the BD&C as the main system here. I mean, just because it covers a lot of things. If you're super interested in for existing buildings, EBOM, let me know. We'll be happy to talk about that either here or after the fact. And if you want to talk about homes, Sarah's your person. So sustainable sites. What?
No.
Okay. Feel free to jump in there. So sustainable sites. There's a couple different areas we talk about when we're talking about the sites. First is the site selection. So, where the building is. Admittedly, most of the time, by the time I get involved in a project, the site has already been selected. But, every once in a while, there's owners that are, have choices between a couple sites and, can ask your opinions about what, if they have a choice, what are the sustainable things that we should look at. So, why do we care? Well, obviously, we don't want to, if we can avoid it, tear down virgin, pristine greenland sites. We want to protect those and build in already developed, populated areas that already have services and infrastructure already there. So, you pick your site that is the most appropriate one you can. If you can increase the density of your building, build up instead of out to minimize its footprint, that can be good. Certainly building in a place, again, that already has a development density. There's points for, points in the rating systems for that. Redevelopment over new construction. The first time I watched that Catherine Moore TED Talk, when she said she was demoing or building a new house, the first thing I said was, what the heck? Why are you tearing down that house? We should be renovating it. So it actually gets into the materials reuse categories where the points are for there.
Are there points for avoiding the coastal hazard zone, say at the beach or at the areas along the river here?
I guess that would have been under the appropriate sites. And we're not going to go point by, list all the points in here. We're talking more strategies and what's good. But yes, there's a site selection credit where you get a point if your site isn't within a certain distance of, wetlands, the ocean, lakes, streams, rivers, things like that. And it has to be above the above the 500-year floodplain. 5 feet above the 100-year floodplain, which really gets more into, I think that gets more into the, I won't say resilience, but, we don't want to build a building where, it's going to, be damaged by a natural disaster if we can avoid it.
In a real world check-in here, FEMA recalibrated its maps here locally, so if you go online, lots of zones have changed now.
And are suddenly in floodplains that weren't before.
Exactly. So if you build there or trigger a permit, there's more stuff to do and study and things to engineer.
Our insurance rates just went up too.
Yeah.
That's exactly how most people find out. What do you mean I'm in a floodplain now? Because FEMA redistricted. If you build on a brownfield site, a brownfield is a site that has real or perceived environmental damage, and not to build on it, you have to remediate the site, clean it up, do whatever. There's points for that. Taking something that's not valuable and turning it into something. And community connectivity and development density, that gets back to the building a building where there's already infrastructure. We want to build in livable, walkable communities where You can live and work and go to your basic services, get groceries, and go to the movies, and get a haircut, and go to the hardware store, all within a walkable distance. We all get in our cars way more than we need to. We don't have enough walkable communities, certainly here in Jacksonville, like other places do. So those are some of the strategies for site selection. Then there's the transportation, how we get to the building. So if we can, we use, in that TED Talk video, she was looking at the transportation, and sometimes that can be our biggest impact on our carbon footprint, is how we get to work, how we get to this conference or that conference, and the flying and all that. So if we can minimize that through carpooling or encouraging people to bike to work, or public transportation, whether it be subway or a rail system, buses, whatever, that's all going to help reduce our overall carbon footprint for the building. So we encourage those strategies. We give points for, if your building's within a quarter mile of 2 bus stops and a half mile of a subway system, there's or a light rail system, there's points for that. If we actually limit the amount of parking on the site, maybe that helps to encourage people to find other ways to get there. You give preferred parking spaces for people who carpool or who drive low-emitting or fuel-efficient vehicles, the ones that are closest to the entrance. Again, all these are strategies that hopefully produce outcomes that we want.
That's a longer time frame, like when you put it in Jacksonville context versus like San Francisco. San Francisco, they were able to create density. They already had amazing density, but even less people drive now, with all the incentives through all the LEED buildings. So here it's going to take longer to get to that capacity, but USGC doesn't infuse it into LEED, but they certainly take it as a data point of what the market is telling them that's coming in the horizon. So the millennials, only 1 out of 4 have cars. They don't want to spend their time in the community, right? They want to live downtown, urban, in most of them. I'm generalizing, but that's what the market trends are coming. So hopefully the buildings will kind of meet that demand and then accelerate. But it's longer term. It's a longer time frame. But that's an example of leadership, LEED being a leadership rating system and trying to nudge the market.
So in the existing buildings rating system, the transportation credit has not just strategies for being close to things, but we actually then measure, which can be hard, measure how many people are taking in an alternative transportation. How many people in your building are actually carpooling? How many people are actually taking the bus or light rail system? And did we provide incentives for people to do that? So again, it's in EBOM, it's about what you're actually doing as opposed to the strategies in a lot of the new construction rating systems. So site selection, transportation, and then the site design itself. So the impact that the building and what you do to infrastructure on the building, that impact that has on the environment. Things like minimizing, again, the footprint that you build, not just build on, but how much you disturb, around, if it is a greenfield site, how much have you, with bulldozers and trucks and storage, have you destroyed acres of land, or do you try to minimize that to be as little as possible? Looking at your stormwater management things, water that falls onto the site, if we've blacktopped all over, for big parking areas, well, then we've got to do something. We took a bunch of pervious area and made it impervious. We got to do something with that stormwater. So let's try to minimize that type of impervious area. Do things like pavers or other pervious materials that we can park on, and it impacts the heat islands. So heat islands are usually dark, thermally massive things like blacktop or concrete that absorb solar radiation during the day and then at night re-radiate it. So it affects weather patterns and can actually have an impact on the load on your building because it can re-radiate back into, create thermal load on the walls of your building. So if we use lightly colored materials and or natural, landscaping rather than hardscape, then we can minimize those heat island impacts. And then we talk about things like that's measured in SRI, solar reflective index, basically a combination of mostly how reflective it is. So white concrete is better than black asphalt. Grass is better than concrete. Oh, and then light pollution reduction always seems to stick out, kind of like a sore thumb, to me in the site credit. It's like, what does lighting have to do with the site pollution? I always like this picture, of the United States from space. Obviously, we're not putting all of the light, all the site lighting we're putting under for parking lots and buildings. It's not all going down to the ground. A lot of it goes straight up into the air. So there are impacts with wildlife and glare and light trespass, but it's also burning energy. We're obviously not using that light very efficiently, and we can reduce the amount of energy that we put into parking lot lighting and site lighting. Dark skies.
This is a study that you're specifically looking at. This is a nonprofit called Dark Skies. They're looking at light pollution, and they have come out with some pretty convincing evidence that actually light in parking lots doesn't increase safety. So it kind of, it's kind of non-intuitive, but these are like professors from all over the world dedicating their time to, just some compelling thing.
Right. More light doesn't make a safer, better quality lighting does, because that's the first thing people say. Well, I can't have a dark site. We've got safety, concerns because I have, students or just anybody who needs to be safe. But we're not sacrificing safety for lighting. We're good lighting design is about glare and uniformity, and not just about more light. So that, let's see, did I cover all those things? Hardscape. We're going to talk more about water usage for landscape here in a little bit. And then stormwater, again, I really think this is a huge opportunity for one of those synergies, and I mentioned it before. You got rainwater that's coming onto your building, onto your site, that if you can capture it, there's lots of different things you can reuse it for, whether it's irrigation or cooling tower makeup or flushing toilets or whatever. At the Marine Science Building on JU, one of the big, was a 10,000 gallon stormwater or rainwater collection that's used for some things. It's also used for, as I understand it, like boat washing and other wash down types of uses, which makes perfect sense to me. Why do we want to control it and build infrastructure to take it away when we can use it? So again, the impervious areas, minimizing that, so let the water percolate like it was supposed to, so I don't have to build more infrastructure, harvest the rainwater. So pervious and impervious. If I throw around a term that you don't know, please, there's no dumb questions. So I was doing a AP study group, one of the first ones, and we were 2 hours into the water section, and I've been talking about potable water all the time, and finally somebody said, what is potable water? Okay, that's an important thing to know for the water. It's basically just drinking water, drinking quality water. So that's the whole point here. So pervious surfaces allows the water to basically percolate or seep through and get back into the groundwater system. Impervious would be the opposite of that, where it sheets off and runs off. Xeriscaping we'll talk about a little bit in the next section too, but that's basically landscaping that either uses very, very little water or no water. Usually hardscaping, but it can be in native plantings too. Okay. No questions about sites? Any other good stories for that? No, not really. Okay, so water efficiency is pretty straightforward. We talk about indoor water, outdoor water, and processed water, and trying to, again, minimize how much of that water we're using and how much of that is how much potable water we're using. So we do that either through minimizing the total amount of water that goes in, or using rainwater or some other alternative water source for these. So when we're talking about indoor water, we're talking about plumbing fixtures inside your building, toilets and sinks and things like that. Why is that important? Well, there's only so much water, and the reason we don't focus a lot on water conservation, in my opinion, is because we're so busy focusing on energy conservation. But we're going to run out of water too. And water and energy are related. So it's not just the water that we're using, it's the energy that's used to get that water to your building. It has to be processed and pumped and transported, and that all takes energy. I used to know what the rule of thumb was. For every gallon of water, how many watts or kilowatts of energy goes into that. I forget what that is, though. But they definitely are related. And we tend to think, in America, as water being some unlimited resource because we just turn it on and as much as we want comes out in an infinite amount. But, not only does that have environmental impacts, it costs money, too. So that's one of those other things that's very easy to quantify and show that we can have some type of payback on it. If I use this many gallons of water, in a baseline building, and I did some good strategies and water efficient fixtures and save this much water, and I pay JEA so much water, that's very easy to calculate and figure out what you're costing. So the strategies are pretty straightforward inside a building. You use low flow or ultra low flow plumbing fixtures. If there's opportunities for potable water sources, if we can capture rainwater and use it to flush toilets, then we're saving all kinds of potable water. I'm a big fan of metering and measurement and verification. Usually we talk about it on the energy side, and we will, but measurement verification of water usage. And even in the newest version of LEED version 4, there are prerequisites and credits for doing more than just a water meter that sits outside your building, but sub-metering within the building. Because if we don't know where we're using our water or how much, then we can't target conservation measures. It gets into the whole performance area, and usually the biggest problem is people just don't know. They don't think about it. You get your water bill and you pay it. That's as much as anybody puts into it. But if you really start looking and saying, gosh, why I'm using this many gallons for my irrigation, and it's 10 times as much as I'm using in the house, maybe I should start looking at how I can reduce the amount of water I'm using for irrigation. Knowledge is power.
And I just had a question. Looking at the waterless urinal picture up there, one of our presenters seemed to have I can't remember who it was. Seemed to have
It was me. Yeah. Hate waterless urinals, y'all. Not gonna lie.
I was waiting for it.
What?
No,
to
go ahead.
jump in? Yeah.
She had
Yes. Hello.
listed a certain right with them with regards to maintaining them, that they required a cleaning that was not quite on the same par level as a traditional toilet. What is the deal with maintaining a waterless urinal?
Don't hold back. No, it's just it does require more intensive maintenance because obviously you're not flushing away what's going in there with some water, so it builds up a lot more. So your maintenance crew has to be a lot more diligent. Yes.
What my curiosity was don't the chemicals that go into maintaining a higher efficiency toilets get back into the water system anyway? Does that sort of cancel out? Isn't there a trade-off there?
Well, there certainly are. There are always trade-offs, but it's not so much about the chemicals. It's about things that are different, and resistance to change, whether it's purposeful or just ignorance. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you don't know that this plumbing fixture is supposed to be cleaned differently than the way we normally clean a urinal or a toilet, then it's not going to either get clean or what happens. The real issue with the waterless urinals is that the procedure is not, actually should use less chemicals, but what happens is they take the bucket and splash it in there and clean it like they would a normal urinal. And the way this works is this thing here is cartridge, okay? And because there's no water there's no heat trap to keep the sewer gases from coming back up. So this cartridge has a gel in it that basically lets the waste go out, but keeps the sewer gases from coming back on. If you put buckets of water to clean the urinal, besides wasting the water that you've done that with, what you do is you erode the gel faster than it's supposed to, and either it needs to be replaced more often, much more often, or you don't know, and the sewer gases start coming back up, or it just gets to be a mess. People have real heartburn about them. So what we've done as a firm, rather than specifying waterless urinals, our standard actually is a 1 pint per gallon urinal, 1.125 gallons of water, as opposed to a standard urinal is 1 gallon per flush. So every time you flush a urinal, 1 gallon of potable water down. 1 pint, 1/8 of a gallon, is much, much, much less than that. So we're doing something
still
good,
effective enough to
right? But it addresses all those maintenance and concerns, perceived and real, that we hear about.
Because the sum is more than the total of parts or whatever, however it goes, convention seems to prefer the low flush toilet to the waterless urinal.
In general. Now, there's plenty of facilities that have standardized on waterless urinals and educated maintenance staff, and they do it right, and it's not a problem. But
One thing I noticed, at UNF, all the men's urinals are waterless.
yeah, UNF went to that standard, and they do a good job of generally
Yeah.
maintaining.
Dr. Lambert brought in the facilities manager from UNF and said it's just a huge savings in water. That's obvious. But what wasn't so obvious was these accessory issues. A valve gets stuck and runs all night. Nobody knows that, and you obviously submitted all that.
Yeah.
But they said that the maintenance issue referred to was marginal compared to the standard toilet. But overall, the maintenance was down. The water usage was phenomenal. There's a little, some odor, just a bit, but
it's an education thing, I think, more than anything. It is. It's making sure your maintenance staff.
So my point. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, so a couple things. One, it kind of depends on the owner. So UNF has in-house facilities, whereas with the city, the Gulf building originally had went LEED Gold and was done when, who was in there before the defense? It was EPB. It was a bunch of different offices in the city, right? But it was pretty much 50-50 women men, right? Now the defense attorneys are in there, and it's like 90 men, 10%. So actually, the waterless urinals, they had to change their contract on the maintenance of it because they were getting much more used. So that was so the building has to evolve. But the kind of bigger question is, or the bigger discussion is that wireless urinals are still kind of a new technology, and this is where green building is thought of as innovative, right? And then it's pushing kind of the edges on products and stuff. And so what I saw at Greenbuild is actually wireless urinals, those gels and their balls, they're coming up with ways to respond to it.
Yeah.
The other negative thing, the feedback we've had on wireless urinals, is old pipes. So when you have copper pipes and all that urine goes down, that's not good. So you have to know the questions to ask. And I want to circle back to my original thing was with the integrated process, you create this dynamic that people can ask questions, and they can say, well, what about that? What about the pipes? And I had an aha moment when I toured USGC's national office, and I was in this inside bathroom, no walls, no windows, nothing.
No walls, very open. Very free there.
And they're in 3 stories. They're like a CI project, 3 stories in a 10-story building. And so no windows. I'm looking at the faucet and I'm going, how is this working? It had solar panel on it. It had a water meter to tell you how much water I was using. And, I was getting both hot and cold water. Well, it was a LED light bulb that was basically powering the solar panel and running the water meter. Mm-hmm. And I was like, So it was a completely off-grid mechanism in this inside bathroom, and someone on that team said, how do we use no energy for these faucets? And they got there.
Cool. Yeah.
But that's how the
It's a
team
little newer
dynamics
technology.
era.
That is an excellent point, Sarah. Get everybody in the room together and we can solve a lot of issues or perceived issues, or at least find a different way. Because what we were getting was, initially, new technology, people put a couple in, have a bad experience, and then they're off of it for 10 years and don't want to do it. We had that with the first fluorescent dimming and motion sensors and those types of things. So rather than go back to, I don't want to do anything, if we go to, a half a gallon instead of 1 gallon or an eighth of a gallon, wow, we've just still addressed whatever concerns there were and still made a huge impact. But typically the numbers that most of the plumbing manufacturers throw around is a waterless urinal will save 40,000 gallons of water a year each.
Gothic building saves 500,000 gallons a year.
Unbelievable. But the same thing on regular flush toilets. Regular toilet is 1.6 gallons per flush standard, and you can get low flows. The 1.28 is kind of a easy standard that doesn't get into too much high technology, but you can go all the way down to 0.8 gallons per flush. So trying to minimize that potable water. And again, I should talk about the meters and the sub-meters. So then there's outdoor water. There's the water we use for irrigation. And I've always questioned why we water plants outside. They're outside. Why do we not just install plants that would normally grow here and let the free water that falls from the sky, keep the plants alive? Well, then some of them aren't as pretty as other plants, but anyway, that's one of the big strategies is local, native, adaptive plantings that we're supposed to grow here anyway that survive on average annual rainfall. Then you don't have to put any irrigation in, and we've saved tons and tons of water. And quite frankly, earned ourselves 4 LEED points for not putting in for using zero potable water for irrigation. But if you do have plants that need irrigation, then strategies go to a high efficiency, like a drip irrigation or something that uses far less water, minimize how much of it is evaporated as it's sprayed. Try not to put water on the sidewalks and get it on the plants. Simple, logical, common sense stuff. This is also, or you can use non-potable water. That's usually the easiest thing for collecting rainwater. Capture it, whether it's rain barrels or a more complex system, and use that for irrigation. That's easy too. But this is a place where sub-meters come in, can be very handy, because then you can know how much water you're using for irrigation, and usually that scares people. And, oh my God, I got to reduce that. Try to minimize it and save a lot of money, especially if you're getting hit with sewer charges on top of your water demand charges. Because a lot of times the way the bills work is you get billed for the water usage, and unless you have a separate meter, they'll assume that all the water you're putting in there is going into the sewer, going down the drain too, and so you get double charged with it, even though it actually does fall on a pervious surface and get percolated. So, and xeriscaping, not just native adaptive, but whenever I think of xeriscaping, I think of like Phoenix and Las Vegas. It's a lot of hardscape, and the reason you have those landscapes there is because it doesn't rain. There is no water, so we're not going to put in anymore. Lots of turf grasses or grasses that need a lot of water.
Xeriscaping was coined in Denver. It really means drought tolerant plants, and that's
Right.
actually not accurate for Florida. Right? We need wet tolerant plants and drought tolerant plants and salt tolerant plants. So depending on where you are, the philosophy here is more right plant, right place.
Right, native.
Native, if you can find it. But sometimes you need wet plants around your retention pond.
Good point.
For buffering and stuff like that. So xeriscaping is actually not totally accurate, but it's just kind of what this philosophy.
And then there's processed water. The easiest way to think of processed water is stuff that's either not indoor water or outdoor water. So those are things that are used for industrial processes, for cooling towers and boilers and washers and dishwashers. We'll talk about EPACT in a second, but any water uses that are not regulated by EPACT fall into processed water. So it used to be that LEED didn't address processed water at all. It was indoor water, outdoor water, and that was it. And then when we started getting into EBOM, and I think LEED for Schools has LEED for Schools has processed water in it, and LEED for Healthcare, we started rolling into, hey, we need to worry about these major water users as well. And now in LEED version 4, it's one of the major categories requirements. So again, if there's opportunities to use non-potable water, cooling tower makeup seems to be a big opportunity a lot of times for non-potable water source. And again, with the metering, to know how much water you're putting into these systems. So the terms in potable water, I already mentioned, this is drinking quality water. We talk about gray water as opposed to black water. Gray water is stuff that comes out of showers and lavs and dishwashers that can be used for certain things and reused on the lawn, or as they all go. That's why they all have handouts. Yeah, and that's a good point. Thank you, Sarah. For terms and strategies are a lot of what is on the Green Associate test. So being familiar with these things, as opposed to black water, which is the real wastewater that comes out of toilets and urinals that needs a bit of processing. Stormwater, rainwater that's taken away from the site, which wastewater and black water can be considered the same thing a lot of times. EPACT, I mentioned that a couple of times. So EPACT is the Energy Policy Act. Right now we're under the EPACT 2005. So even though the term is energy, it regulates, besides a lot of energy usage, it regulates plumbing fixtures too. So EPACT is the standard that says how many gallons per flush I can construct a toilet if I'm a manufacturer. I can't legally build a 3-gallon per flush toilet because it doesn't meet EPACT. EPACT says that's 1.6 gallons per flush. Gets into 1.6 for 1.0 for urinals. Faucets, we didn't talk about faucets and sinks. In the 2005 version, that got a lot more stringent. It used to be that it was it 2.2 gallons per minute that a sink could use. Now it's half a gallon per minute. So you go into a new building and turn on the sinks, and it seems like the water's not coming out as fast as it used to. Half a gallon per minute is the max that you can put in there. And from a LEED point mongering standpoint, that used to be a great strategy that we could use. If the standard that we're calculating against says I can use 2.2 gallons per minute, and I'm doing this great strategy that gets me half a gallon per minute, I've saved a ton of water and really increased the percentage water savings in my building and get a bunch of LEED points for that. Well, when the standard changes, and LEED 2009 uses EPACT 2005, and the standard goes to 0.5, and what I put in is 0.5, then I'm basically getting no credit for that as a water efficiency strategy. So as LEED adapts, gets harder, evolves, and incorporates new standards, things that we used to do as a great sustainability strategy start becoming baseline. And then we got to work a little bit harder to achieve the same percentages. And that's an excellent example. So we used to get 40% water use reduction on projects without too much trouble. Now, if we get to 30 or 35%, it's like huge. EPACT. So that's a test thing too. EPACT 2005 for regulating plumbing fixtures.
This is not a test thing, but how much water do we use residentially outside on the line?
In gallons?
Percentage.
percentage of all the water that we use in a house?
100%. How much of your water do you use? Potable water do you use?
You mean in Florida?
Typical. It could be 60. It's around 50%. We spend 50% of our potable water outdoors on our lawn.
Which made it sound like it was going to be a lot higher.
50% is a lot.
I'm after my last water bill.
You
Turn it off.
So the point is that we don't need to do that. We're cleaning it up. We're making it to drinking water standards, and we're going out and pouring it on our lawns. It's really, really inefficient way of using water, and we can do better. We can do rain barrels. We can do cisterns. We can do native planting that doesn't need it. There's just a whole lot of low-hanging fruit.
Have any hotels tried to be certified LEED by the
Sure.
Where do swimming pools fit into this?
See, swimming pools would be processed water. So under a LEED for new construction, unless it was brand new to version 4, it just doesn't count. It's not even in the calculations.
What else is processed?
But yes, that's actually a good point. The energy that goes into heating it or pumping it, that's going to count in your whole site energy. But the actual water usage wouldn't be. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
What else would be processed?
So kitchen equipment is usually the biggest thing. So dishwashers, clothes washers, that's processed water that wouldn't count. Again, unless you're LEED for schools, actually does have requirements for processed water and LEED for healthcare. In a hospital and a healthcare facility, not so much anymore, but used to use potable water as a cooling system for like MRIs and CTs, and some of them still do as a backup. But a lot of times sometimes they used to just be once through cooling. Meaning they would go through to keep the equipment cool once and then down the drain. And there's really no reason for that because it's just about heat transfer. It's not about the water itself. I was doing a project in Pennsylvania. It was a small cancer center and had, well, not small, but had some, some big equipment, some CTs and MRIs and linear accelerators, and doing a site survey of the building and walking around the outside, and literally there's this pipe sticking out of the wall, the outside wall, about waist high, and water is just coming out of it. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I mean, not a lot of water, but, a little trickle. And so, go in to investigate, and turns out it was once through cooling for this CT that was literally dumping on the ground outside the building. So that would be what we call low-hanging fruit, and, put it onto a water system that recycles, recirculates. So that would be bad. Don't do that. All right, any questions about water?
A real world visual to it, 5 minutes on that. The courthouse, as you all were thinking about that always intrigues me when I think of water in LEED in that building. I'm sure y'all had to have multiple conversations about what to do with water and innovative ways to capture it. Can you talk a little bit about some of that, or
We have no, sir.
Not a big area for you all. With you all.
Oh no. I mean, all the areas about well, in any LEED project, we talk about all of the areas to try to strategize as to how we can do better. Conversations related to water were pretty fundamental. There's low flow fixtures in there. The I think we're 1.28 gallons per flush on the toilets, and I forget what the urinals are. I think they're half a gallon per flush actually, because we had that waterless urinal discussion, and that was just going to be, it was too far of a road to hoe to change some of that. One of the things that I think is a big missed opportunity is that we talked about and ended up not doing is what we call capturing the air handler condensate. So air handling, air conditioning systems, besides when they cool, they pull moisture out of the air, humidity. And if their air handler at your house has a pipe that's probably going into a drain or going to outside, that's taking that humidity out of the air, and then usually just dumps it on a gravel bed at your house. In a large commercial building, usually is piped right there in the mechanical room to a storm drain goes down into the storm system. That's pretty standard. In a hot, humid climate like in Florida, that, especially for a building that runs, well, it doesn't run 24/7, but it runs a lot of hours and pulling a lot of moisture out of the air. On that scale of systems, we can do something with that water. That water is better than potable water because it's just pulling moisture, it's pulling humidity out of the air. So it is absolutely clean and pure water that we're just dumping down the drain. We could capture that water and do something with it as one of our, non-potable water sources, whether it be to flush toilets or be to do cooling tower makeup, or in this case, I thought the opportunity would have been for landscape irrigation to do that. Now, the downside to that is that there is cost associated with that. There's infrastructure. You have piping, and you've got to store the water, and then you've got to pump it to whatever you're going to do. And sometimes either paybacks are too long, or there's just not more capital dollars in the front end to put into it. And ultimately, that was a strategy that I think we should have thought harder for. But 5 minutes on Okay. Any other questions, thoughts about that? What?
May I just make one point?
Absolutely.
In Florida, we are in nearly a water crisis that a lot of citizens don't know about. Central Florida has been designated by the Water Management District as a specific zone. I don't remember the exact wording of it, but
Water advisory.
Water advisory. But our groundwater is fed by a primordial flow of water from Georgia called the Floridan Aquifer, and the level is falling. You can see it in lakes in the Keystone Heights area disappearing and all that kind of stuff. This is important stuff, and it's really locally important.
Yep. The states are already starting to fight over water. Florida and Georgia fighting over the aquifer.
Lake Lanier and supplementary
And
to
Alabama.
that, it affects the ground stability because of the sinkhole situation.
Water is intense farm, so.
And particularly in Tampa, Polk County, it's an issue.
One of the things that has progressed in LEED, I mentioned that every rating system seems to have more credits in water. The very first, additions, like I said, indoor water, outdoor water, that's all it addressed. And as new systems within version 3 started coming out, started to address processed water. Now in version 4, the prerequisites started, rather than, so we've got to get to 20% as a minimum to even get certified. In version 4, there's prerequisites for the metering side of it. So we're LEED is trying to get more serious about about water and its impact. But you guys are absolutely right.
Conservation is the cheapest form of energy. If we have to go to the St. Johns River for our water, which they've already decided at least 10 years from now that we will need to, it's going to take more chemicals to clean that up to get it to our sinks.
Yeah.
And that's going to be more cost for you, for the consumer.
And energy.
And energy.
Right.
And not good for the river. So there's a lot of no-win situations, but I don't think we can necessarily prevent it. I'm not the person to ask about that, but we can certainly stall it and delay that aspect to it with all these pretty low-hanging fruit things to do with buildings.
Yep. Yeah, the stat, I guess, that I used to quote all the time was that if all of the Earth's water were equated to 1 gallon, all the water in the world, 1 gallon, the amount of potable water we have would be about 1 teaspoon. And the fact that we take that potable water and dump it on the grass is, seems crazy. Okay, that's it. Oh, I already talked about most of this. I didn't know I had a slide. So, for test purposes, you want to be familiar with those consumption rates. Toilets 1.6 gallons per flush, urinals 1 gallon per flush, sinks at half a gallon per minute. We talked about low flow fixtures, harvesting water. I didn't talk about the baseline and how those calculations are done. So for the indoor plumbing fixtures, the way we're measuring this percentage is we're basically saying, all right, if our building used all of the EPAC baseline fixtures, 1.6, 1.0, half a gallon per minute, baseline fixtures, and then you take the number of people in the building, number of days per year the building is used, and USBC has basically guidelines that every person is going to use the bathroom 3 times a day. So it's days per year, people times days per year times 3, so they're washing their hands 3 times and they're using either toilet or urinal 3 times a day. And you do that math, and that gives you the number of gallons per year. Okay? They break it down too so that men are using the urinal twice and water closet once, women are using the water closet 3 times. That's the calculation. So then you do that same calculation, but instead of using the EPAC standard fixtures, you use the high-efficiency fixtures that you're putting in your building. So if you have waterless urinals, it goes from 1 gallon to 0 times that. If you've got 1.1 gallon per flush toilets, you see how that goes. And then you do that comparison, and that's going to use this many gallons, and you just measure the percentage. And that's how many, 20% to get a prerequisite, and you get additional points beyond that. The irrigation does a similar thing, similar type of calculation, a baseline calc that I don't understand, that I always have to have a landscape architect explain to me, but it's based on kind of standard design for certain plant types and what their water needs versus how much water you're actually using, how much potable water you're actually using, and you do the same type of percentage. That's how we do our calculations. I think I talked about the rest of that. All right, so no other questions about water? Okay, we're going to spend the next 3 or 4 hours talking about energy. So buckle in. So energy is all about using less energy in your building. So why do we care? Well, buildings use a lot of energy. We talked about buildings being the #1 user of energy and producer of CO2 emissions. Obviously, producing that energy has negative impacts. It costs a lot of money. The refrigerants we use to provide cooling have not been the best friends to the environment in the past with CFCs. We try to reduce that. So that pie chart kind of shows where in commercial buildings in the U.S. we generally use our energy. Heating and lighting and cooling and ventilation, which all together, is the making the building comfortable, and well, it is 3/4 of all the energy that goes into a building. That's why we generally target HVAC and lighting systems first off in energy reduction, because it's the biggest piece of the pie. There is more and more conversation about plug loads, process loads, things that we actually literally plug into outlets, and how much energy that uses. Because as we get more efficient buildings and make this piece of the pie smaller, then by proportion, the process energy, the plug loads, becomes a little bit more. So we're going to start seeing in energy efficiency discussions addressing plug loads and how we can minimize those vampire charges and trickle charges. Even when things are turned off, they're still drawing little bits of power, and even though it's not a lot, it's constant. How do we address those types of things? So anyway.
If you show that same pie chart for Florida specifically, you'd see a lot of that space heating move over to the cooling side, but it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
But, yes, in a Florida specific chart, the cooling piece gets bigger, but the heating piece does not go down as much as you would think it would. In commercial buildings, we still do a lot of what we call reheating. So you cool down the air to dehumidify it, and then we've cooled it down too much, so they actually heat it back up a little bit to bring it to temperature that we can discharge it. Now, there's certainly other ways to do it, but buildings in Florida still do a ton of reheating, which is insane. And there's other ways to do that, achieve the same thing. So, but you're right. Overall, when you look at a chart of energy, buildings in Florida generally peak in the summer, as you would expect, as the air conditioning load goes up and down in the winter. But it doesn't go to 0. So we want to be energy efficient. We want to have energy efficient buildings, and there's lots of opportunities and ways to do that. When we talk about passive opportunities, things like bringing in daylighting to help reduce how much energy we need to use for lighting, or In other parts of the country, you might talk about thermal massing, where you actually try to bring in more heat through the windows to like on concrete floors, so it re-radiates and keeps your space heated then at night. But here we attack lighting. Lighting's a quarter or a fifth, 20% of the energy that goes into buildings, and we can reduce our lighting power densities by using more efficient light fixtures. You hear a lot about LEDs. LEDs are good, but they're not the magic bullet to solve all your problems. More building controls and dimming and turning lights off when they're supposed to be off. And efficient HVAC systems that minimize the amount of reheat you put in a system, or try not to heat and cool at the same time. But I always say that what we forget a lot about is the building envelope, the skin, the windows, the insulation, the roof. And all things being equal, same number of people in the building, same use of the building, the envelope can have the biggest impact on your building's energy performance, especially in more northern climates. Has a big impact here, but not as big as you'd think it was, because in northern climates we spend a lot more energy to heat because it gets way colder than the normal baseline temperature. Meaning that if we try to keep this room to, let's say, 70 degrees, when it gets to be 90 degrees outside, yeah, that's hot, but it's only a 20-degree difference. In the winter, it doesn't get all that cold. We're in the 50s, more or less. That's 20 degrees on the other side. In the north, I'm from Pennsylvania, 70 degrees inside, it'll be 20 degrees outside for months on end. That's a much bigger difference. That's 50 degrees of difference rather than 20. So the envelope, that's why you just throw insulation into the windows and the walls there. But anyway, my point is that let's not forget about the envelope. The envelope, I tell my architect friends, you guys have a real impact on buildings' energy performance, and we need to address that, not just attack the HVAC and the lighting. And the plug gloves. Talked about that a little bit. A lot of times when we talk about renewable energy sources, we just talk about, okay, well, how much renewable energy do I need to put on the building to get to this percentage? The way you need to attack that is you want to make the building as efficient as you can first, reduce the demand through all those strategies that we talked about, from efficiency, but also, the size of the building, take advantage of free energy where you can, whether it's in daylighting or thermal massing, the envelope I mentioned. But I really believe that the biggest goal for a commercial building, the biggest impact, could be setting an energy goal. I don't care what it is, if it's to beat code by 20%, 30%, whatever that goal is, whether it's in percentage or measured in BTUs or however, and then the whole team work towards that goal. Too often we just design buildings, and then, oh, I forgot I got to do the FLOCOM check to make sure I comply with code, and you throw some numbers in there, and hopefully it meets it, and if it didn't, then you've got to go back and redesign. But if you're going to have aggressive goals, you establish those at the beginning, and you've got a much better chance of meeting them if you design to them rather than just measure at the end. And then once you've reduced the demand as much as you can, that's when you start trying to look at your renewable energy technologies, because you can, if you've squeezed every watt and BTU out of the building in the first place, then you can get bigger impact from a smaller renewable energy system.
Question, maybe I'm getting into the weeds too much, but tell me if I am. One of the elements of air conditioning that I've heard about is trying to keep the ducts in the insulated space, as opposed to, say, in a single floor building, particularly having ducts in space that's not air conditioned. Mm-hmm. Does the LEED crediting account for that? If you put your ducts in the air conditioned space, do you get some positive value on your points?
Well, it all gets into the way we measure our energy for a LEED project is through an energy model, whole building energy simulation. So we do a computer model that models what the baseline building was versus what we're putting in there. So we're actually looking at a whole year's worth of energy for the systems we put in the building. Do we get specific credit for putting ducts in insulated spaces? Not entirely sure. Chris, you got a feel for that?
It is part of the model.
Is that part of the model?
You tell it how much heat loss you have to do.
Yeah, because that's what it's really about. It's about heat loss. So no matter how much you wrap or insulate your ductwork, if it's in a super hot space, you're gonna, it's not as efficient as putting it in a conditioned space. So
Tom, you zeroed in on a question that a lot of people, it takes a long time for people to get to and realize, is that LEED is about describing what is in a green building, not how to do it, not how to get there. So,
well, especially on the energy side.
Right.
It doesn't, there's not a lot of how-to. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's getting into the weeds, and it's almost too prescriptive if you do. And they wanted to leave flexibility, they wanted to leave creativity and innovation to happen. And two, it's just like each site is so different. But a lot of people go into LEED thinking it's going to tell me what and how. And in the reference guide, there's this features section that coming from where I want to get to the actual performance and the behavior change and stuff like that. And that's where all the nuggets are. And that was actually initially very light, and it's gotten a lot stronger with all these projects coming online and lessons learned. And it's now with their project libraries and profiles, the depth is incredible. Of cool features and innovations and stuff like that. What?
nothing. Camp just reminded me what time it is, that's all. Yeah. Okay, so let's move along then. We talk a lot about renewable energy. There's a big handful of strategies that we talk about. But when talking about good strategies versus what is considered on-site renewable energy for the test, these are the things that we're talking about. Photovoltaic, which is different from solar, and we'll get to that in a minute. Wind, hydro, geothermal, biomass isn't on here, but that's one too. If you're going to take the test, you need to know what those strategies are. People interchangeably use the word solar when a lot of times what they mean is PV. So there really is a difference between solar thermal and photovoltaic. So solar thermal is using the radiant energy of the sun to heat a liquid, usually water of some type, and then use that as heat transfer for somewhere in the building, either for hot water heating or heat your pool, or could be space heating through a heat exchanger. PV takes the sun and converts it through the crystal panels to electricity, directly into electricity, which is then connected to your building's electrical system. So those are different things, but a lot of times get used the same. Probably. They're both good. And you might hear us talk about net zero buildings, and that's where LEED wants to get to, is to regenerative buildings where we produce more energy than the building uses. It can be measured in a bunch of different ways, so it doesn't always mean the same thing. It could be net site energy use. Sometimes it's measured in carbon or cost or whatever, but it's more going out than is coming in. Yeah, that's right. Producing more than you use. And so I already talked about some of the strategies. First, you make the building as efficient as possible, and then ultimately you add on your renewable technologies. A net zero building doesn't necessarily, most times isn't, off the grid. So you're still connected generally to your building's or to your city's electrical system. And there may be lots of times during the year where you actually are using more energy than you're producing, but then there's other times of the year when you're producing more, so that the net effect over a year works out to be zero. And this is absolutely doable today with technologies we have. I mentioned that in our, the way we calculate the energy credits is through an energy model, and that's in the design and construction credits. In EBOM, I was talking about the EBOM process and talking about Energy Star score. They use Energy Star as the baseline. So Energy Star is basically just a big database of buildings, and you put in some basic information about your building, where it is, what type of building it is, how many people are in it, how many computers are in it, how many hours a week it operates, and 12 months of actual energy usage from your utility bills. You plug all that in, and it spits out a number. It's a percentile basically on a scale of 1 to 100. 100 being the most efficient building ever created, and 0 being very, very bad. And if your score is above 69, that's good for the prerequisite in LEED bomb, and more points for better than that. Energy Star gives its own certification, Energy Star certification, which you have to have a minimum score of 75 to reach. So it's comparing your building to similar buildings in your area. So it's comparing if you're an office building, it's comparing you to other office buildings in your geographic region. That's why you have to put it in your zip code. So it's not comparing you to here in Florida to a school in New York, more or less. Okay. Yeah. I've been talking all along about ongoing performance and not just stopping at the end of design and construction with measurement verification, tracking where we're using energy and how much we're using in those areas so we can target energy conservation measures. If I know how much lighting energy I'm using because I've separately metered the lighting, and I know how much I'm supposed to use or how much I typically use, and I'm looking at it every month, if for some reason one month it goes way up, I say, that's really weird. And you go and you investigate and you find out, oh, look, my lighting control system was overridden and my lights have been staying on all night. You find that out sooner rather than later and save a lot of money. Same with commissioning and retro commissioning, making sure that the building is working the way it's supposed to. I'll talk about that here in a second. And training of the building operations staff on how the systems are supposed to work in the first place is an essential part of energy performance. As engineers, we get excited sometimes about installing the greatest whiz-bang control systems that are so complicated that you'd have to work for NASA to be able to control, and not thinking about how the maintenance people are going to actually operate the building or use the building. More is not necessarily better.
I'd like to add something here. I've been doing a lot of research in the utility program arena, and one of the areas they don't address is the big opportunity in staff training and LEED commissioning or retro commissioning, where a lot of buildings have gotten long in the tooth, a vane breaks in the air conditioning system and the cold air doesn't blow to the right place anymore. Or the staff turnover. They were all trained well when the building was new, but they don't have a training program for training new staff. And that needs to be part of the whole process of when you hire somebody new, they need to learn how to run that NASA piece of equipment.
One of the things that's best practice in enhanced commissioning of a building is addressing, it's on there or not, producing an operations manual for that very reason, so that there's at least at one point some documented evidence, book of how the systems are supposed to work, how they're supposed to be operated, and all the tools to be able to do that. And staff training is an important part of commissioning. So I kind of already talked about commissioning. As an energy strategy, it is one of the prerequisites. It's so important to building performance that USGBC has made it. It's always been a prerequisite. Independent verification that the systems are working the way they're supposed to. I would say that commissioning is a process. It's not an event. People think of the functional testing piece of commissioning when we actually get into the space at the end of the job and really get on ladders and put the system through its paces. That's just the one step, not even the final step in the commissioning process. Best commissioning practices start at the beginning of the project. The commissioning agent is an integral member of the team, looking out for the owner's interests and making sure that operations and maintenance concerns are addressed throughout the process. Things as simple as access. How can I get to that VAV box above the ceiling? Is it impossible to get to? Because if you can't get to it, then you can't maintain it. It's not gonna work right. So commissioning is very important. Questions about energy? Use less of it, or produce more on your own. The materials section is it's pretty easy to understand. The materials that go into our buildings have a big impact not only on the buildings but on the environment. I already lamented how much waste goes, construction waste goes straight into landfills. And if we do simple things like just try to recycle it, we can reduce a lot of that. Landfills are, we try to minimize what we put into landfills, certainly. Yeah, the stat that there in red always floors me, that of all the waste that's produced in the United States, 40% of it, more or less, comes from construction and demolition of buildings. 40%. And so, how do we reduce that? Certainly, if we build smaller buildings, that would help. If we can reuse or recycle or repurpose anything that takes a material and saves it from going to the landfill and is used somewhere else, that's good. If it's recycled, that's fine. If in a renovation we take all the doors and we don't donate them to Habitat for Humanity, that counts towards our construction waste management as well, as long as it doesn't go into the landfill. Like I said, we used to do dump, and still do sometimes, to separate that, but the industry's gotten a lot better about commingling of demolition waste. So the materials that go into the building, have a big impact on, like I said, on extraction of raw materials, or depletion of raw materials from their extraction. Sarah started to mention that in the new version of LEED that we look a lot more at, the materials from a holistic standpoint, not just life cycle analysis, but what goes into the materials, how they're made, what's in them, and how that impacts, human health, among other things. So the material credits in the new version of LEED have changed considerably. But we still talk about good things in materials: recycled content, regional materials that are extracted and manufactured within 500 miles of the site. Just points for that. Reused, recycled. Sarah already talked a little bit about certified wood. FSC certified wood is good. From a waste management standpoint, one of the things that the contractors do or should do is develop a construction waste management plan and then implement it. We can specify not just materials with recycled content, but I forgot to talk about rapidly renewable materials that have a 10-year growth cycle or less. And then again, from the operations standpoint, once the building's done, if you've got a LEED bomb building, having that purchasing plan and solid waste management plan goes a long way to not just getting LEED points, but reducing the impact. That's materials in a nutshell. That's pretty quick, actually.
We're running short on
Feels like I skipped something, though. Did I miss anything? Yeah.
on materials.
Yeah.
No.
Any questions about materials? Reduce, reuse, recycle. So environmental quality is about the healthfulness of the building, the people that live and work in our buildings. We want them to be happy and productive because we spend so much time inside. So it's not just about air quality, it's about comfort and connection with the environment. So air quality is certainly part of it. I mentioned before, this is one of those places where, not quite a synergy, but a place where strategies kind of compete with each other. So when we're in this category, more outside air is good. More ventilation air is better. It's more helpful for people. But the more outside air we bring in, the more we have to spend on energy for conditioning and dehumidifying that air, especially in Florida. So you got to find that balance. Comfort, connection to the outdoors. Did you have a comment, Sarah?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I didn't mean to size it up.
So I already talked about some of these things: non-smoking policies, making sure we have enough ventilation, enough outside air. We can monitor the carbon dioxide, in the space, and then adjust how much outside air is brought in, rather than just bring in a certain amount no matter what. This room, for instance, is going to need more outside air, more fresh air if it's full of people than if it's empty. So if we have sensors that measure how much CO2 is in the room, and we can adjust how much outside air is brought in when the room is full, then we're doing two good things. We're being smart about our energy usage and bringing in outside air, but we're making sure that we bring in enough. Filtering, both during construction and in the air handlers during operations, to minimize the particulates, what we call pollutant source control. We try to keep contaminants and pollutants out of the building through walk-off mats and keeping smoking areas and stuff away from air intakes and operable windows. But also, once pollutants do get in the building, if we have better filtration on our air handlers, then we're going to have better air quality. Same with, we talked about low VOC materials a little bit. Best thing to do is not have materials that have a lot of chemicals that are off-gassing and causing people headaches. So low VOC materials are pretty standard anymore. That's still one of the best examples I use of how LEED has helped transform the market. Mold is bad. We don't like that. Talked about balance. So VOC stands for, anybody? Volatile organic compounds. It's that new car smell you get when you get a new.
So these are the kind, we'll be asked to decode acronyms like this on the test?
Yeah. That's what the terms to know on there are things that for a test you should know those terms because they're used in the standard. So we talked about the low VOC materials. MERV is a measurement of the filters that I was just talking about. So the higher your MERV number, a MERV 13 filter is like just below a HEPA filter. So that has filters more than a MERV 11 or a MERV 8 filter.
What does it stand for?
Minimum efficiency reporting value, but you don't need to know that.
Where would all these terms be defined in the handbook?
Oh, that's an excellent question. As far as test preparation goes,
You sent the PDF. That was like 80-something pages.
yeah, that's the short version. That's the LEED Core Concepts Guide. So it talks about a lot of what we're talking about today, but even in more general terms. And yes, I do believe most of the terms defined are defined in there. There is also a book, which has just been sitting here with my coaster. If you're going to take the Green Associate exam that you can look to buy, it's the LEED Green Associate Study Guide. Yep.
I went through a study group when I was still back in school with both of those books, and we did a comparison because we were making copies and sharing books, and there is so much information that's duplicated between the two books.
Yeah, there is.
That this one is that just the core concepts that you sent is just the nuts and bolts. It's so much easier just to take one book and go through one book instead of trying to go by two books and then there's repeating information. Just my
Sure. I would agree with that, actually. I wanted to make you aware that this book existed, especially, and I didn't bring a hard copy of it, but I think the gold standard of reference material is the LEED reference guide, the LEED AP reference guide. There's 3 of them.
Which is like this.
Yeah, which is like this thick. It's not meant as a study guide. It is the reference guide. So there's 3 of them. Well, actually, there's more than that, but one for BD&C, one for ID&C, and one for EBOM. If you're going to take the AP exam or take our study group, then you're going to need that book, whether the PDF copy or the hard copy. And it talks about a lot of detail, not just about each credit, but the intent of it, the strategies that go into it, what you need to document for LEED Online. And my point is that if you're planning on taking the AP exam, investing in that book rather than buying this one gets you everything you need. Yeah, they're not cheap.
This will be adequate for the GA.
Yeah, if you've got it already, yeah, sure.
Mark, do we still have that email that I can follow up with of all those extra resources, sample tests and stuff?
Yeah, I do. I do have it somewhere.
So we'll send that out as well. So there's kind of 3, there's like fellow test takers that come after the test and kind of want to help others take the test. So there's some really good resources we'll send you. You can do practice too.
One of the things I skipped over in the energy too is the reference standard, ASHRAE 90.1. For test purposes, there's a handful of ASHRAE and other different standards you need to know. One of the things that we'll send you all is a big list of them. But when you think, if you hear ASHRAE 90.1, you need to think that that's the reference standard for energy usage. ASHRAE 62 is the reference standard for indoor air quality, which is why it's referenced here. It tells you how much ventilation air you have to bring in. There's another one, ASHRAE 55, which is about thermal comfort, making sure people are comfortable in the spaces. I really need to add that to the slides.
55?
ASHRAE 55. And there's some others that are on that list, but
Those are the three big ones.
What is that last acronym?
SMACNA, that's just a fun word to say. SMACNA.
Sheet metal and
Sheet metal
air
and
conditioning.
something, I forget what it stands for.
Yeah, I don't remember.
SMACNA is the reference standard for construction IAQ management. What's construction IAQ management? We want the contractors to build the building in such a way that it doesn't start day one with indoor air quality problems. So there's a series of requirements that are in the SMACNA guideline that talk about things like protecting, that's what that's a picture of, protecting ductwork to make sure it doesn't get dirty and filthy while the building's being constructed, keeping a clean construction site, minimizing pollutants and chemicals while you're in the building constructing it, so that, you know, like I said, it's day one, it doesn't open with IAQ problems.
And actually, this is one measure that.
And that's what that is, construction IAQ management.
Worker safety on site is something that LEED doesn't quantify, but it's a huge benefit on the side. Like during the construction site, it's just inherently safe because kind of the framework that LEED provides. So it's kind of a side by product.
And beyond air quality, again, with the connection to the, being comfortable in your environment, IAQ deals with things like daylighting and views. People are generally happier, more productive, less absenteeism if they, can see the outside. That's views. Daylighting is having usable, non-glary light coming into your space so that you don't have to run your lights at full power all the time. Giving occupants control over their environment through their thermostats and lighting controls. Acoustics wasn't originally in LEED, but as schools and healthcare started, those rating systems started coming out, there's acoustic requirements in those rating systems, and in version 4 as well, because we want people to be comfortable. That's IEQ in a nutshell, and just to wrap up, there's the final two categories are regional priority and innovation and design. So innovation and design is 6 credits for things that, well, 5 of which are things that you do that are not addressed anywhere else in the LEED rating system, that are innovative or new or measurably better than whatever the building standard is. So if it's already in LEED somewhere, you don't get innovation credit for it. So you can't say, we used really good windows, so that's an innovative credit. No, that's just part of your energy performance. But if you did, what does that? It just freaks out. What's a good example? So low mercury light bulbs. That's actually a strategy in LEED E-Bomb that's not addressed in new construction, but it's good because it reduces the mercury content and it goes into landfills. So that's a strategy that you can do in LEED for new construction that counts as an innovation point. The other way you get an innovation point is what's called exemplary performance. If you drastically exceed the requirements of a LEED credit. So LEED recycled content, you can get 2 points for having 20% recycled content in all your building materials. If you exceed that, get to 30%, you can get your points over here for recycled content. You can also get an innovation point for doing that much better than what's required. You still get, and there's 5 of those that you can do. Oh, pilot credits. Pilot Pilot credits are test credits that USWC tests out to try to see if they get incorporated in some form or fashion into the next rating system. So if you try to do one of the pilot credits and give the USWC feedback, tell them what you did, how you did it, how you found it, what was hard about it, whether you meet that credit or not, you can earn an innovation point just for helping them test it out and put it into the next version. So, for instance, in LEED 2009, one of the pilot's credits was for integrated design process. We talked about getting everybody together and having an integrated process. If you tried to do that as tried to meet the requirements and gave them the feedback, you could get a point in that. And they liked it so much that now it is in LEED version 4 as a potential credit. So there's 5 of those. You can get a point for having a LEED accredited professional somewhere on the team. I think that's still the point that every single certified project has gotten ever. And then the regional priority points, based on where your zip code. You type in your zip code, and a list of 6 possible regional priority credits comes up, things that have been deemed to be important to your area. If you achieve, and these are the already LEED credits, so again, if you're in Phoenix, one of the regional priority credits that's going to come up is water use reduction. Get to 30% water use reduction, we're going to give you an extra point, or 25% or whatever it is. So you get your point just for already doing what you were going to do in LEED. You get your normal points, you just get a bonus point for doing those things, up to 4 of them out of the 6. So even if you did all 6, you only get 4. You don't have to do anything else, it's just we're going to give you a bonus point for these things if you happen to achieve them. Does that make sense? That's where your extra 10 points comes in when I say it's a 100-point system, but it's really 110 points. The 100 points are in everything up through IEQ, construction or indoor environmental quality, plus then the 10 bonus points on top of that. So there's technically 110 possible points. And that's, I included in your handout stuff about LEED version 4. We were never going to go over that today because, unless we just had way extra time, because for your test, if you take it before June, it's going to be on LEED 2009 types of credits.